Michael Crichton is on the cover of this week's Time magazine as the hitman with the golden touch. He is a trained physician at Harvard, film director and screenwriter. He recently added television producer to his list of achievements with the Emmy Award-winning series ER. But of course, he is best known as one of the most successful novelists of our time. Spanning almost 30 years, his prolific writing career includes such blockbuster hits as The Andromeda Strain, Rising Sun, and Disclosure. His latest book is The Lost World. It enjoys a national release of 2 million copies. It is a sequel to Jurassic Park, whose film version grossed a record-breaking $912 million. I am pleased to have Michael Crichton back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
Why this for you now? I mean, was it things that you wanted to say about dinosaurs? Was it simply easy for you to do? What caused you to write one more time a book about dinosaurs, the fact that there was a second sight?
You know, it was really something that came from readers. I mean, from the first publication of the book, kids began to read it, and they would send letters going, what about the sequel, what about the sequel, what about the sequel? And I had not ever done a sequel before and would always say, there won't be one. But then as time went on, they would say, well, this would be a good sequel, and here's another idea for a sequel. And now you're reading them thinking, no, that's not right. No, we wouldn't do that. And then you start thinking, well, why not? Well, what would be good?
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, there did seem to be the likelihood that there would be another film. And Stephen seemed to have some interest in that. And
I bet Stephen had a lot of interest in that.
Well, you know, I think, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that there's always a sort of mixed feeling about this, you know, going back and doing it again, or would it really be interesting? Would it really be different?
And can it stand on its own two legs?
Yeah, all those things. So,
or 4 legs.
Right. 2 or 4, depends on the species.
Depends on species, isn't it? Right.
And actually, I began to feel as though, you know, living in this town of sequels, where, you know, there's just sequel. I've never done a sequel. And it's kind of a difficult thing to do, I would think.
The trepidation is what? That,
well, it's a very difficult structural problem because it has to be the same but different.
Yeah.
Now, if it's really the same, then it's the same. And if it's really different, then it's not a sequel.
Yeah, it's something else.
So it's in some kind of funny intermediate territory.
Yeah. And what happened to cause you to say, all right, I'll go ahead? I mean, did you think about characters? Did you think about, there are things about this story that I have not told? Was there some metaphor you wanted to bring to the fore?
Yes, there was some of that. There was
Which?
absolutely. Well, there was the feeling that I had that I would be able to talk to a large audience, particularly a large audience of kids. And so what would you talk to them about?
Yeah. Something they can relate to, something.
Yeah. Or something they ought to be thinking about.
Yeah. And what else? I mean, in terms of ideas, did you want to massage?
Well, I think there's hardly anything more difficult to talk about in a popular book than evolution.
Yeah.
It's just a very innately complex subject.
But that's your genius, Michael. I mean, you bring complex... No, come on. I mean, it is. You have taken... I mean, let me suggest that you go to a publisher or you go to a movie company and you say, I've written a book about DNA... Now, before the Simpson trial, I've written a book about DNA. and didn't mention dinosaurs, didn't mention storytelling, just mentioned... They wouldn't say
can't wait.
They won't say can't wait. No. Yeah. But when you wrote this, you really wanted to treat some subject matter. I mean, evolution being one, but also some sense of natural selection, and also you wanted to say some things about behavior, did you not? That had some...
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Ideas about behavior. Well, there's a third thing that I ought to tell you about. At the time when ER was just before it came on, there was some publicity relating to ER. All the press questions had to do with whether it was going to be very controversial and very contentious, because that's the way anything that I was involved with was perceived. And I thought...
And this was after Disclosure.
This is after Disclosure, which was certainly controversial enough. And I thought, you know, I've done Rising Sun and Disclosure, and maybe it's time not to be so controversial. Just
be comfortable.
Well, just break the pattern.
Yeah.
You know, and perhaps not also to... You know, you can become a scold.
Once you made the decision to go, Was it easy then? I mean, once you found the peg that you wanted to hang this story on, because you had a lot of stuff to go with, you're building on something. You don't have to establish a scientific bona fides, do you? I mean, you've already explained that.
Well, you can't. My feeling was you had to address a different scientific subject area.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first book to me was about sort of micro subjects,
right,
and DNA and technology. This one is about macro subjects. It's about populations.
Right.
It's about long-term trends. It's about extinction.
Do you think the human species is on the road to extinction because of its behavior, because it's lost control of civility?
Well, I think, let's see what we'd say. Are we on the road to extinction? Absolutely, because all species become extinct.
Yeah. And because we aren't treating the planet very well.
Yeah, although, you know, there's questions about that.
Right.
You know, but I mean, at least there's an argument to be made that we're not doing our best. In terms of civility, I don't know. I mean, actually, the concern that I have about civility is that the most important thing for us as a species, unlike other species, we evolve and adapt to our environment through our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our bodies have not significantly changed in 35, 50,000 years, but our behavior has changed enormously since the time that we were chipping flints in caves.
Because our brain has been at work.
Our brain has been at work, but our brain hasn't changed. You know, it's the same brain, but we've had all this
cumulative wisdom.
Right, elaboration of stuff. And the need that we have as a species, therefore, is similar to what a population needs in terms of variability inside the population. There has to be many different kinds of animals inside, I mean, a variation inside a species, so that if something happens, like a plague or something, there's enough variation that some animals survive because they have, let's say, an innate resistance or something like that. Well, for us, the equivalent of that is ideas. There has to be a pool, a variable pool of ideas, diversity of ideas, ways of thinking, notions of what to do. And one of the concerns that I have is that our technology now is shrinking the pool of ideas, and certainly the current tendency in this country, you know, the lack of civility. I mean, I think it's really true that some people are suggesting that maybe the Congress needs a timeout. You know, the way children, I mean, this kind of shrieking.
Yeah, but you made a speech in which you did that on the periphery of that particular issue. Well, coming back to the extinction of the species, I mean, your sense, is this something you worry about? Is this something, or is it just of interest and curiosity to you because it is fodder for a next great book?
Do I worry about it personally?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense of...
No, I don't.
No, it's not something...
No, it's not. I mean, it's not around the corner, I don't think. No. In fact, I think that most of the things that people are worrying about here are, you know, the trends in global warming or the changes in the rainforest. I'm really not persuaded that maybe they're not a good idea, but it's not clear exactly how dire they are.
That the threat is as characterized.
On the other hand, we are in a position to recognize that certain kinds of changes, certain kinds of behavior can produce catastrophic change. And it's not always clear where those things are.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that's a sort of the notion that we can always proceed with. I mean, this idea of civility to me is an example of that. We're in a nation that really wants to shout everybody else down at the moment, you know, and we're really shrinking the notion of available options. We're shrinking the diversity of opinion on almost every subject so that you're either for it or against it. You're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. This is not healthy.
Why, I want to come back to something else you said and funnel into that. Why is technology shrinking the body of ideas? Why does it do that?
I don't know.
I would think it would expand ideas.
That's right, and that was always the promise.
Right.
The promise was always, you know, 500 television channels and this great
information superhighway. And,
this great diversity. But it turns out,
and the internet, and we can speak to everybody, and we have access to everything. And my God, you know, the global village is upon us.
Well, we have now 500 channels, and we know what that's like. You know, there's
Nobody
500
wants to watch them. That's what it's like.
Yeah, and why that shrinking occurs, you know, why there's a sort of limitation, I'm not entirely, I'm not clear at all about it, but it does seem to be happening.
Yeah. Let me come back to the book. Characters, who comes forward from Jurassic Park?
Only one, I think, Ian Malcolm.
He's the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's called on to go. He's played by Jeff Goldberg in the film, right?
Yes,
Goldblum.
Yes.
Goldblum, right?
Bloom.
Bloom. He goes to Costa Rica.
Yes.
And he's the only one that will make an appearance.
Well, I don't know. Stephen may do something else,
Yeah.
but in the book, my thinking really was that I desperately needed that character back.
Yeah.
You know, because he is the ironic commentator inside the story
right.
who talks about the action as it takes place.
And we thought he was dead, but...
That's right. It's Sherlock Holmes on the Reichenbach Falls, you know.
Well, speaking of that, why the title The Lost World?
It's a reference to a Conan Doyle
Yeah.
story called The Lost World.
Why did you choose that, though?
Well, you know, it was a thing that I liked as a child. It's one of the more pulpy Conan Doyle stories. It's a Professor Challenger story, and it's actually not a very good story, but it's a wonderful title, and it's about an expedition back to a place where there are dinosaurs.
Let me talk about you and satisfaction. Are you happiest in the creative process? When is Michael Crichton happiest? At what point in that process? Gathering the idea, the concept, the research, beginning the first chapter, getting to the end. As your workday begins to grow from maybe 10 hours to 12 to 14 to 16 to 18, you know.
I think that if I was charting it, you know, there's an early dissatisfaction, which has to do with what will I do next, you know, or with.
You mean how do I go from chapter to chapter to chapter? How do I keep the audience?
No, just choosing the next project.
Okay. Oh, next project.
Yeah. You know, that early sort of decision about will it be this or that, and if it's that, then how exactly will it be? And then at a certain point when I'm doing focused research, and it begins to come together, I start to get quite excited. And of course, it's still just ideas, you know, so it's quite wonderful. And it has no concrete form to be disappointing yet. And maybe the first 60 pages is very exciting.
Right.
You know, it's sort of this wonderful future ahead, and I just can't wait. And then eventually it starts to be another book.
Yeah. So where you began to think you were going is not where you're going to end up ever.
I don't know how. No, it isn't that. It's just that this wonderful sort of nebulous thing starts to be concrete. It starts to be this page, this way of formulating the ideas, and then it's just its specific expression kills that beautiful idea. You know, it's like your hopes for working on a movie. You start, oh, it's going to be so great, and in the end, it's just a movie. That's all it ever is.